Hello everybody, this is AJ, the Mighty Glue Stick, and this is a bonus video. This is one of my new midweek videos that I'll try and get more regular updates on, where I talk about locations and things without necessarily talking about monster ecologies. So this is my the Mighty Glue Stick Explores series. And I thought I'd kick off with a request from somebody who's about to start a campaign that's going into this area, and talk about the Shadowfell for Faerun. Now, in my Explore series, I'm going to concentrate on the main setting of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, as it is now, which is Faerun, the world of Toril, and the history and geography of, and the cosmology of Faerun. So the Shadowfell is very much a Faerun thing. It doesn't really make a lot of sense unless you're talking about the history of the Forgotten Realms and the cosmology of it and the gods and things. So without further ado, here we go. So the Shadowfell is sometimes just called the Plane of Shadow or the Land of Shadow, and it's a parallel plane that is inside but beside. So it's very close by. It's like very, very vibrationally close to the reality of the Forgotten Realms. It's one of the, if you say you have a misstep in a teleport spell or something like that, and you just are a little bit out of phase with normal reality, you may actually just pop into the Shadowfell or the Feywild. That would be the most likely places, or pop out of reality into the Astral Sea, perhaps. Or if you can't manifest physically, you may manifest etherically as a spirit entity, non-material. But the Plane of Shadow, the Shadowfell, is the result of a relatively recent event where Mystra was killed. The goddess of Mystra was killed by Shah, kind of her sister goddess. And Shah created the Shadowfell in 1385 Dale Reckoning calendar, by combining the negative energy plane and the plane of shadow into the Shadowfell. And since then, the Shadowfell's existed as a center of Shah's power, as well as a transitory place for the dead mortals on their way towards judgment on the Fugue plane. Now, the Fugue plane is it's very hard to get to unless you're a dead person, basically. There's only a few ways to get there, which is if you're a divine servant who has a mandate to collect souls for a deity to become the future petitioners of that deity. So you're basically going to the judgment plane, the fugue plane, and picking up judged souls to take them to their rightful location. Or you can reach it through non-permanent portals from the Nine Hells or the Abyss, or through death is essentially how you get there. And it's a neutral plane. It's a very, very neutral plane. It's just a grey mist, really. It takes the form of a level sort of a surface that just rolls through a permanent mire of mist, and it's featureless apart from a crystal spired city called the City of Judgment, which is visible pretty much. It's the only thing that's really a feature of the plane, and that acts as it's the only thing to see, so it draws the souls that end up on the Fugue plane towards it, and that's where Kalimvor and Yurgles reside, and it's Kalimvor's domain, and it's the place where he judges the dead and decides which afterlife they should go to, which other plane, aligned plane they go to. So they, that's basically the Fugue plane for you. The petitioners they go on to whoever they worshipped in life, or those who are false or faithless, basically stay in there and serve Kalimvor and Yurgle. And those servants enact punishments on the false, and they act as the city's militia against devil raids. And on rare occasions, they also attack the Abyss to punish demons for attacking the city as well. Anyway, so back to the Shadowfell. So the Shadowfell is a dark reflection of the material world. It's the plane of shadow, so that it's while the features of the place are concordant with the prime reality, the prime material plane, they don't have an origin there. So there's no history of, say you're in the prime material plane and you are outside of a castle and then you travel into the Shadowfell and there's a dark, ruined castle there. Nobody built that castle. It just forms as a dark reflection. So that gives you some idea that this is not a normal place. It's a more of a spiritual sort of a place. It's a place where the reality is dependent on somewhere else. So it's not really wholly formed itself. It's a reflection of another place. But that doesn't mean that you can't manipulate matter and make things permanent there yourself. It's just that there was no sort of geography or creation or divine aspect of it. It borrowed its essence, its structure, from another template. So it's a copy of another place. And left to its own devices without any conscious living thing making any changes to it, it will just reflect a decayed version of the prime material plane by default. So it was created by Shah to be a seat of her power, and her power is entropic. So this is a place where undead creatures draw their power from, much as they used to draw their power from the negative energy plane. So the effect is when a living being is on the plane of shadow, the Shadowfell, the entropy is very strong, and that is it's dangerous to life, and eventually it can be fatal to life. However, those who do live there deal with the negative consequences of this this net entropic effect by essentially going a little bit crazy from a prime material person's perspective. And the people who have lived there for a very long time are known as the Shadakai. So the Shadakai deal with the effect of the plane, which is a numbing and a depressing entropy that weakens the spirit of people who live there into despair, so that essentially they shut down, become catatonic, and just die and fade away, or become part of the undead that wander the plane, basically zombies or wraiths or other spirits or shadows. If they're killed by basically giving up the will to live, they will be predated upon by the undead creatures that live there because they hate all living things and seek to destroy them. So, as you can imagine, the plane is choked with undead creatures, but not as many as you would think. I mean, it's not like there's seas of undead here. Undead creatures, living creatures, well, undying creatures, are not actually that common, really. And although this is the plane where you would expect to find tons and tons of them, they really don't sort of naturally occur here. They travel here for whatever means, because maybe they were banished or something such, or they are creatures that fell to the predations of the undead creatures that were already here from living folks who came here. All kinds of people can be found in the Shadowfell because it is quite a close by and accessible parallel dimension. It's one of the easier places for people from the prime material plane to get to, as easy as it is for Fey creatures to walk back and forth from the material world. So too can creatures of the Shadowfell. Although, because the plane is naturally entropic, the energy required to pierce the veil and go between one place or the other is not so much an effort from the Shadowfell to get into the prime material plane. It's a disruption of the natural vitality of the prime material plane, which weakens the barrier and allows the Shadowfell to come through. And this can be seen in places where there are a net negative effects, such as a battlefield where atrocities have been happening, or a lair of cultists where sacrifices have been made, some scene of tragedy and executioner's block, a dark and dank cellar where captives have laid in torment and died, that sort of thing. These places become sieves where the energy of the Shadowfell can leak into the prime material plane and things can come with it. Now, it's an aspect of Dungeons & Dragons, and I had this conversation on a comment thread recently, that when I'm talking about the energy of entropic, or the negative energy, In this case, its energy is not just a positive or a negative thing. In Dungeons and Dragons, it's an entirely different sort of concept. It's not exactly souls, it's not exactly a life force, it's an alternate life force, it's a negative life force which has the same sort of effect in reverse. So you could call it anti-life or anti-soul or anti-spirit, that when they meet each other with positive spirit, they annihilate each other. So in the case of the Shadowfell, it's a universe where it's been spun on its axis and anti-life is more prevalent than positive life, than normal life. So it's an antimatter universe sort of thing. But that doesn't mean that living creatures are annihilated instantly. It's a gradual wearing down effect where they essentially can't recuperate the enthusiasm for life because the depressive effect of the Shadowfell is weighing down them all the time. The Shadowkai are people who deal with this by inflicting pain and atrocity on themselves to basically give them motivation for living. So the moment they feel themselves slipping into ennui and depression and catatonia, they will give themselves a violent body piercing or tattoo themselves or anything to make their body feel alive, to make them feel vital. And they will also engage in outlandish games of chance or sports that court death. So adventure sports for the Shadowkai are actually necessary for their survival. That adrenaline rush that you feel from bungee jumping or cliff diving or paragliding or some such thing is what they need to feel vital, and so it has become a part of their culture. The way I look at it is, imagine that you're at a circus, a carnival, and the carnival's all that there is, and you can never leave the carnival, and eventually the ordinary mundane attractions of the carnival will hold no interest for you whatsoever. In fact, they'll become more of a deterrent than anything, just a torment. So you turn to the more bizarre and weird and outlandish and fetish and icky and dangerous pleasures, and it becomes a drug that you follow and follow and follow until eventually it may lead to your death. And that is the culture of the Shadowkai. So they're pretty intense, and they carry that intensity into the material world when they go with it. In fact, the material world, if you'd imagine you've lived in the Shadowfell your entire life, and then you transition into the material world is as vital to them as the Feywild is to creatures who travel over from the material world. It's bizarre, it's unusual, it's weird. They're not used to plants just leaping out of the ground on their own without extraordinary means to keep them alive. They're not used to there being living creatures everywhere. They're not used to flies and spiders and ants and worms in the ground and pollen in the air and sunshine and clouds and stars in the sky and that sort of thing. It's too much. The brightness of the sky is punishing to them, and but eventually they come to realize that it's not unpleasant. This vitality, it actually allows them to relax and just be, and they can actually just enjoy the moment and just feel pleasure with nothing else stimulating them. So that's something that Shadowkai have to get through their head, that acclimatizing, that customize, that release from a relatively torturous and very hard existence in the Shadowfell. So there is a city in the Shadowfell which is the location of most adventures if you go there. There are probably other locations and things that pepper around this plane, but there's a city called Gloom Lord that is the most popular. It's basically like if you go to the Plane of Fire, there's a City of Brass, or if you go to Mount Celestia, there's locations in various other places that are synonymous with that, and Gloomlord is the synonymous city with the Shadowfell. So that is where you would find yourself if you're being drawn into the intrigue and the society of this Shadowfell, Gloom Lord is the capital city. And that has been depicted. There are maps and things of it. But there's also notable inhabitants, along with the ghosts, spectres, and other icky things, and dark ones, and the Shadowvar. So dark ones are basically shadow fae. They're like quicklings. They're furtive, Jawa-like, goblin-y, small, quick, and merciless killers who are very capable assassins. And dark ones serve dark powers, basically. That's what they do. The Shadowvar are... oops, I lost my page. The Shadowvar are inhabitants of... oh boy, it's one of those... The Shadow Enclave, it's called, or Thultanthar? Thultanthar? Or the Shadow Enclave. During the course of the people's 1700-year exile from Toril, they battled the Malorgrim and other shadow horrors from the realm, becoming more attuned to the plane of shadow with each generation. Later Shadowfell for a short time and were known as Shadowvar. So these are people who originated in a specific place, and they dressed in the style of clothing that was the Netheril style. So these are Netheril people. And they were fervent worshippers of Shah, so this is what's drawn them into this conflict that happened a long time ago. And the Shadowvar were skilled wizards, and they had a warlike temperament, and they liked sorcery, and yeah. Anyway, but that's ancient history. You may find remnants of the Shadowvar around, and you can look up that on the Forgotten Realm Wikipedia. So notable inhabitants, there's various Netherese remnants from previous histories, which are now just basically destroyed on the prime material plane of Toril, but there's remnants of the Netherese empire of magic still existent in the Shadowfell, which is kind of ironic actually, because it's a place which has preserved these places because it's ironic that the place of entropy and decay would hold remnants of the past still alive, but really what it is, it's like a festering, the remnants of those empires is past hurts, past grudges, past anger that has persisted in a cold fury for a very, very long time. And some of the residents there may actually feel like they want to go back and take over bits of the material plane back again and re-establish their past empire. But of course, to do so, they would have to destroy what has grown in their stead. And that's kind of like the entropy of the Shadowfell manifested itself as a hateful legacy, which if it's unleashed in the material world, will actually destroy more than it creates. So if you get that concept of what the interaction of the people of the Shadowfell is like in the material world, that would pretty much sum it up in a nutshell. They may interact with the material world, but they've got a lot of negative energy in them that has to dissipate in the material world before they can level out and become normal again. So yeah, they carry a lot of grudges and a lot of hate and a lot of weirdness. So you have Ephron, the Twisted Tiefling, who's a Shadowvar warlock and former student of Drago Quick. You've got Drago Quick, who's a Netherese lord and powerful warlock, serving dark powers. You've got Shadowvar monks and former members of the Brothers of the Grey Mists and former members of the Monastery of the Yellow Rose. All of these locations and places and groups that you can look up on the Wikipedia here. You can follow these links until the cows come home, and you'll just keep on reading and reading, and the story will get deeper and deeper. So there's actually a lot of resources. I'll put links in the video description down below so you can actually follow some of these links here. It's listed under the notable inhabitants from the page that I'm reading right now. So yeah, Gloom Lord, the domains of dread, and various other places. There are demi-planes within the Shadowfell, and these are created by dark powers that serve as prisons to trap creatures of extreme evil and to serve as sustenance to the dark powers. So Strahd and Ravenloft is a demiplane, but there's other places where dark, evil creatures are located that are a source of, they're a font of negative energy because of the cruelty they inflict and things like that. So victims may be fed into these places, and the torment and death that is inflicted by these negative creatures is siphoned off by dark powers, much like the will of souls is drawn to create, to morph reality by divine powers. That's the whole thing behind worshippers, and I'm going to talk about that in an upcoming video about the ecology of gods, why devils and gods and things require souls and stuff in the Dungeons and Dragons universe. Similar sort of negative aspect for domains of dread and negative creatures and pain and suffering that is drawn on by dark powers to create negative energy to manipulate reality in a negative way. But of course, everything they do acts to slowly destroy reality, whereas the morphism of gods manipulates and creates. So yeah, different aspects, flip sides to the same thing. So some of these demiplanes are basically negative energy hells, you could say. They're places where horrible things happen to horrible people, and horrible evils that are too destructive in the universe are relegated here by dark powers who seize them for their own purposes. And they do it from a covetous point of view, having something so evil that the mere threat of unleashing it in creation is something that is a bargaining chip that can get gods of creation to do things for you. So yeah, it just garners them more power, more manipulation. So demiplanes such as Barovia are ruled by the vampire Strahd von Zarovich, himself a prisoner of the dark powers. Passages to Barovia are rumoured to exist somewhere in the Misty Forest, based on reports of werewolf attacks and Vistari presence in Daggerford and surrounding areas. Elminster of the Sage of Shadowdale has shown himself aware of the Count Strahd and his mist-filled domain, and is as well as how to journey to and from there freely. Elminster, having briefly sent Voluthamp Godam to Barovia to explore the valley through Volu, though Volu was initially unaware of the dangers. So Elminster sent him on a mission. It was like, I want you to investigate this valley, and sent him off to Barovia to investigate Strahd and his nest of vampires and werewolves. It's amazing that the guy came back alive. You get the feeling that Elminster doesn't like Volo very much. So yeah, there's lots and lots of Shadowvar. There's shades, human shades, members of the Cavius Dun. Ratsis the Spider Farmer. So there's the Ghost King, a composite being formed from Hephaestus, a Dracolich, Gren Sherabon and its 7 disembodied liches, and the sentience of Yarashkrik, and an Illithid which had powers over the undead denizens of the Shadowfell. Wow, that's a tangled knot of plot right there. You've got Drassic Riven, who's a godling, an offspring of a god, had his fortress there, where he hid from Rivenlin the Nightseer and an archdevil, Mephistopheles, both of whom shared a piece of the divine essence of Drassic himself. And you've got dark powers, vestiges of ancient dead evil gods that either dwell on the plane or were banished there and feed on evil creatures and become trapped in the Shadowfell. So somebody also requested that I do a video on there's these basically undead gods, which are unborn offspring of gods, which are really horrific. And that sort of, yeah, when I'm talking about the ecology of gods, I'll talk about undead gods as well, and how gods are killed, and how it can be that a god is dead, but a revenant of that god still exists and operates in the universe, the cosmologies. And it's tied into the fact that gods exist across multiple planes of existence. So It may be that most of the greater reality of a god is killed, but remnants of that god's essence still exist, and it's possible for a negative remnant of that god to exist. So basically, like the dark id of that god has been cut off and set free, and it powers its own existence by drawing upon negative energy to sustain itself. So yeah, it may actually even be a dark remnant of a formerly good god, who he's cast off all semblance of evil of himself into a shadow entity, kind of like he split his personality on purpose, and the split now exists independently when the original god has actually been killed. So yeah, that's the sort of thing you're dealing with. The Domains of Dread. So yeah, there's entities that you can look up as the Ghost King, the Charon's Claw, the Last Threshold, the Companions, and of course, if you can track them down, you can ask Volo about stuff. And you can find out about a Domain of Dread by reading up on Ravenloft and Barovia and the people who live there. And there's all sorts of shadow realms which exist within the Shadowfell, much as you would find domains located in the prime material plane or in Feywild. So yeah, I hope that's given some input. So you can also look up Gloom Lord. There's a lot of information on that in various wikis. So if you look up if you enter D&D Gloom Lord in Google search, it will pop up a Wikipedia article on it for you. And yeah, that's basically it. You can use the Shadowfell as a means of transport also. Various books, fantasy books, not necessarily related to Dungeons and Dragons, have something like this. And I point to the most recent cinema movie, which I think captured the essence of the Shadowfell really well. Is this movie series called The Night Watch. And it was a Russian movie that's been translated into English. And it's a little bit disjointed in places, but the aspect of the character having a vampiric nature that he accentuates by drinking blood, and the ability of these creatures to cross over into a parallel dimension called the Gloom. I think that was what it was called, the Gloom. And yeah, it's a negative energy dominant existence. So it exists parallel, and it's quite interesting because it's dark and it's misty. It's very hard to see and navigate. All the sounds are muted, all the feelings are numbed. But it's a hungry plane that manifests itself as a constant buzzing of mosquitoes, and the mosquitoes suck on your blood. And if you stay there too long, you get covered in this sort of ash, and you basically shut down and fall into a catatonic state. So it's a really good visual, and the cinematic feel of that place is that it's dangerous to stay there if you're not prepared. If you're not native to that area, you can't deal with the negative energy there, and it's very dangerous to life. But you can pass through it momentarily, or pass into it to escape notice completely, because you've just stepped out of the material universe into a parallel plane. Then you can move through that parallel plane and then step back into the material universe again if you have the means. But it's relatively cheap energy-wise to do so, because creatures from the prime material plane are literally bursting with vitality in the Shadowfell. So the vital energy of a living being can power a lot of the dark technologies of the Shadowfell that rely on predating on positive energy to get free of the entropy of that plane. You can say that it's the escape velocity. The mystical escape velocity of the Shadowfell is life. And the free ticket to enter into the Shadowfell is death. And that's about it. If you have any questions on that, please, by all means, ask them down below, and I'll be happy to look up various bits and pieces for you, and have discussions about the various concepts of the Shadowfell and the discussion down below. Thanks very much for listening. If you like this sort of video, give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do. And because this won't be on the main playlist of my monster ecology videos, certainly go and check out the playlist that I have available on my channel. It's pretty hefty, and this one is just going to get longer and longer as we go. Thanks for listening, everybody, and I'll catch you again on the weekend.